Shogo Makishima is a villain that you just can't hate.
Yeah, okay.
He's the most relatable anime character of all time.
Yeah, he is, but why? Why would a cold-blooded, murderous, psychopath anarchist be lovable and relatable? That doesn't make sense. Hello and welcome back, my filthy weebs. It's your friendly neighborhood degenerate Kaishi, and today we're gonna take a deep dive into the psyche of one Shogo Makishima. But first, a recap. Also, there's gonna be spoilies for the first season of Psycho-Pass, but only the first season. I'm not gonna spoil anything beyond that. Psycho-Pass is set in a futuristic cyberpunk Japan, which is not dystopian, people, for God's sake. I'll talk about that, okay? So in the future, an advanced biomechanical supercomputer network called the Sybil system measures the psychopaths of all the citizens of Japan by monitoring their mental health via a cymatic scan, which makes you wonder why the anime is not set in China. Now, this psychopath also includes a crime coefficient index, which is a numerical value that represents a person's tendency to commit a crime. When it goes above the normal value, which is 100, the person is pursued and apprehended by the inspectors and enforcers of the Crime Investigation Department of the Ministry of Welfare's Public Safety Bureau, thus maintaining peace in society. So far, so good. Enter Shogo Makishima, a person who is criminally asymptomatic, which means his cymatic scan does not represent his actual personality, which means that the Sybil system fails to accurately measure his psychopaths. Makishima sees this as being abandoned or left out by the system. Due to this, he is alienated from society, and as a result, he comes to view the Sybil system as oppressive, flawed, and just too mechanical. This leads him on his lifelong mission to take down the Sybil system and free the society from the clutches of the inhuman, unfeeling authoritarian government. Now, in order to carry out this mission of his, he does a lot, and I mean a lot, of bad shit. From somewhat questionable to downright despicable. Not to mention, he's directly and indirectly responsible for the deaths of a whole lot of people. He shows no regard for human life, not even those of his quote-unquote accomplices. He manipulates them, uses them to further his own agenda, and nonchalantly disposes of them. He literally calls it a game. I think the most heinous thing that we see him do on screen is the killing of Yuki Funahara in episode 11. I don't know, maybe it's because he gets up close and personal in this scene, or maybe because the scene itself is just so well made and hits so fucking hard that it stuck with me well after I had finished the anime. Not to mention the impact it has on the characters and the overall narrative. The events leading up to it are a self-contained scenario in their own, but they provide a perfect build-up for this scene. All the pieces fall right into place and Akane comes face to face with this mysterious mastermind haunting the bureau for many years, now holding her best friend hostage. Now, since the Sybil system cannot read his psychopaths, Akane's dominator remains locked even after he openly declares that he would kill Yuki right in front of her. But then he gives her a gun and tells her to shoot him if she wants to save her friend. As if toying with her entire philosophy of life, kinda like Joker does to Batman. And then he slits Yuki's throat while looking calm as a saint in paradise, showing an all-time low psychopath of 0. This really shows how far deep into the abyss he's fallen. He does not consider killing Yuki, who's an innocent bystander by the way, morally wrong. In fact, he truly believes he's doing the right thing, which is why his hue never gets clouded and his psychopath remains within the normal range. To him, what he's doing is not a criminal act. He justifies every heinous crime as morally right because of his firm belief in the fallibility of the Sybil system. So how exactly is he a character that you just can't help but love? So far, all he's done is disrupt the community, manipulate others, and kill innocent people. Well, to that I would say it's because he's relatable. I found myself agreeing with almost everything that came out of his mouth. Even though his actions do seem selfish and despicable, There is, however, an element of working towards a greater good in his overall philosophy. In the end, he wishes to give the people the power to decide the matters of their own lives, as well as the power to bring justice. Very Rousseau-esque, if you ask me. But we're not doing a philosophy of video, so I'm not gonna go down that rabbit hole. But that's not the only reason. I believe the real reason we find Makashima relatable is because he's a very human character. First, obviously there's nothing very non-human about him like many other anime characters, except his ability to control his psychopaths at will. He doesn't have any superpowers, he gets in a dangerous situation, he gets hurt, he gets shot, he dies. He's just a normal human being. But the anime goes even further and adds these little scenes of him either doing or talking about mundane everyday things, which not only add to his character but also sort of reaffirm that he is indeed a normal human being. One of these scenes is in episode 15 and also happens to be the topic of today's video. Yeah, the Yuki scene is fantastic, but it's not the one I wanted to talk about. The scene I want to break down today is so insignificant that it's almost never talked about, which is kind of weird when you think about it, because it's got a lot of meat on the bone, if you catch my drift. And of course, I'm talking about the conversation between Makashima and Chaegu-sung right after they distribute the psychopaths blocking helmets and wreak havoc all across the city. Who knew some of the best lines ever said by a psychopathic anarchist would be over tea and motherfucking biscuits? Now, to understand this scene, I divided into 3 distinct parts. All 3 of these provide different information about Makashima as a person. At the start of the scene, when Chaegu-sung tells him that he's very nervous about their future after what they've done to the city, Makashima says that he likes this ordinary side of him.
君のそういう普通なところ、すごくいいと思う。僕も君も
He says that they're both ordinary and common people. Right off the bat, the vibe that I got from this line was humility. I couldn't help but draw a comparison to the Socratic paradox. Yes, I'm gonna go and drag the Oji-san of philosophy up in this motherfucker. I know many of you would be familiar with the Socratic paradox. It's pretty well known. It's kinda like the I'm gonna become the king of pirates equivalent of philosophy. It goes like this. I know one thing that I know nothing. Now, the saying itself has been interpreted and analyzed in various different ways, many of which seem like they're reading too much into it. The one that I like is perhaps the simplest one, its interpretation as a motto of humility. You see, back at the time of Socrates, the knowledge available to mankind in its entirety was very limited. Socrates was one of the very few people of his time, arguably perhaps the only one, who was said to possess all the knowledge available in the world. Now, what made him different from his intellectual peers is the fact that Socrates realized how significant the knowledge he possessed was as compared to the knowledge that was still undiscovered. When others boasted of their extensive library of information, to Socrates all he knew might as well have been nothing. The thing is, Socrates was aware of his ignorance and gladly embraced it. Similarly, Makashima embraces his commonality. Now, he's not really a common or ordinary person. He's actually very special, given that he's criminally asymptomatic and, you know, a super fucking genius. But that's not what matters to him. The thing is, he considers himself to be nothing special. This scene shows this humble side of his. Now, I know it can be interpreted as a desperate attempt by an outlier to try to fit into society because Sybil Senpai doesn't notice him, but I believe that in his perspective, he's just another common man. Remember in the Yuki scene when he gives Akane a choice to shoot him, he doesn't just give her the gun because he knows that she wouldn't shoot him, he does it to make Akane cross that line, to make her understand the significance of taking matters such as justice into one's own hands. He's willing to risk his life for it, because an ordinary person's life doesn't matter in the pursuit of the greater good, and in his eyes, his own life is as ordinary as it gets. Right after that, he says that he's not an avaricious person, meaning he's not greedy or materialistic, and all that he wants is, quote, a world in which everyday things are done in an everyday way. Again, a very human thing to say, and it also has the same element of humility. Now, in the second part of the scene, they start talking about the city itself. The city, of course, represents the society in general. Makishima says that it seems to be the parody of a fictional city in a Philip K. Dick novel.
昔読んだ小説のパロディみたいだ。この街は。フィリップ・K・ディックかな。ジョージ・オーウェルが描く社会ほど支配的でなく、ギブスンが描くほどワイルドでもない。
He further adds that it's not as controlling as those in George Orwell's books and not as wild as those in William Gibson's. Now, this exchange gives us some really big clues about how Makishima perceives his society. And in order to understand that perspective, I'm gonna briefly talk about the works of the writers that he mentioned. Let's start with George Orwell, specifically Animal Farm and 1984, because Makishima is canonically a fan of these. Now, these books share a lot of similarities with the world of Psycho-Pass. In Animal Farm, the pigs represent sort of a dictatorial oligarchy that controls the rest of the animals of the farm through lies and deceit, similar to how the Sybil system does all it can to hide its true nature from the general public. Both of them look out for their own survival first and foremost. There are even more similarities in 1984. The mysterious ruler, Big Brother, is exactly like the Sybil system, who keeps tabs on the citizens through constant surveillance and enforces the law using thought police. No, not that thought. Citizens with questionable motives are branded as thought criminals, and those who step out of the line become unhuman and mysteriously disappear from the world. Sound familiar? But despite these similarities, Makishima believes that these worlds are different from that of Psycho-Pass. The reason is that these similarities are only in the execution, in how these worlds operate, not in their motives or reasons for existence. You see, the Sybil system exists to serve humanity, not itself. Its sole purpose is to make the world a safer place for humans to exist. For that purpose, it ends up taking a lot of freedom from the people and doing a lot of heinous things. But that's the thing. To the Sybil system, they're not heinous things. They're actions that are necessary for the continuous existence of humanity. As for the morality of these actions, well, the Sybil system is above that. Human concepts like morality and righteousness do not apply to it, even though it's literally made of fucking brain pickles. But as the Chief of Bureau says, they have transcended mankind and achieved omnipotence through the expansion of their understanding and judgment by sharing their cognition with one another. Be as it may, the Sybil system is A, beyond being mere human, and B, not self-serving. However, the ruling parties in both Animal Farm and 1984 are clearly selfish and do not give a rat's ass about the people. The pigs separate good food for themselves and start to wear clothes and walk upright and warp the existing laws to make a society that would serve them. Similarly, Big Brother's party, Ingsoc, wields total power for its own sake over the people. In fact, 1984 is the textbook definition of a dystopian society, being dubbed as the dystopia to end all dystopias. Psycho-Pass's world, however, is not dystopian like I said before. Quite the opposite, in fact. For the good, everyday, normal people of the society, it's a utopia. Imagine a world where all the important decisions of your life are made for you in order to bring out your best potential and make sure that you live a happy, fulfilling life with the least amount of conflict. Sounds like a dream world, doesn't it? That's the world of Psycho-Pass in everyday life. It gives the impression of being dystopian because the anime exclusively focuses on the dark side of society. But it's not dystopian, and therefore not as controlling as Orwell's worlds. Next up is William Gibson, who's known as the pioneer of cyberpunk genre. When reading his Sprawl trilogy and Bridge trilogy, it becomes clear from the get-go that the worlds in these books are not as controlling as those of George Orwell or Psycho-Pass. They have shady corporations, drug lords, illegal hackers, making the world just a bit too, as Makishima puts it, wild. In fact, the very concept of an all-knowing, all-seeing overlord is completely absent. The overarching themes in Gibson's works are unintended consequences of technological advancements and class conflict. Therefore, his worlds are also not dystopian like Psycho-Pass. But unlike Psycho-Pass, there also isn't an all-powerful system that would ensure the continuous existence of a peaceful, prosperous society at any and all cost. Therefore, it's too wild. That leaves us with Philip K. Dick. Now, before comparing his work with Psycho-Pass, it's important to understand that the similarities between the two come from Makishima's understanding of his society, how he perceives and interprets his own world. A common theme in almost all of Philip's works is disillusionment with the world and snapping back to reality.
Oh, there goes gravity.
The main characters of his story gradually come to the realization that their world is an illusion created by powerful external entities as a political conspiracy. This directly mirrors Makishima's own life. I believe at some point during his life, he too became disillusioned with the seemingly ideal society created by the Sybil system. No doubt, this must have been one of the reasons why he started seeing the similarities between his world and those depicted by Philip K. Dick in the first place, because he could relate to the main characters of these stories, similar to how we can relate to Makishima. What is this? Relateception? Now, as for the nature of the society, Philip's worlds are without a doubt dystopian, such as those seen in Ubik, A Scanner Darkly, and Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, but not as dystopian as those depicted by Orwell. There is no direct control of a supreme leader over the masses. They have a general sense of freedom and free will. But as I said before, it's all an illusion created by an external entity. An entity such as a hive mind made up of pickled brains of criminally asymptomatic individuals that secretly control every aspect of human society. Also in Philip's books, there isn't a clear distinction between good and evil. We only have different people with different ideals who have completely different perceptions of society, striving towards very different goals, which is also a very clear theme in Psycho-Pass. Also, you must have noticed I'm using his first name Philip instead of Dick. Well, that's because I don't want to offend our overlords up in the YouTube headquarters. And with that, we move on to the last part of the scene.
紙の本を買いなよ。電子書籍は味気ない。
Here, Chaegusong asks for a book recommendation and Makishima tells him to read Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. Chaegusong says that there's also a movie based on that book, to which I said, I see. You're a man of culture as well. Makishima tells him that the content of both is very different and that he should read the book as well. But he should buy an actual book, not download a stupid ebook. Ebooks lack character.
Nani?
I totally loved this line, not because it's a very intellectual and educated thing to say while flexing your knowledge of avant-garde pieces of literary works over a nice cup of flat white at Starbucks, but because someone in real life once told me the exact same thing. They said that the experience of reading a book is always lacking if it's an ebook. The feeling of the book in hand, the texture of the paper, the momentary pause while turning the pages make the experience something more than just reading what's written on the pages. Now this might sound like a hipster Starbucky thing to say. It sure does to me because I'm more of an anime guy. But listening to Makishima talk about books as tools for adjusting one's senses, I couldn't help but think back to this real conversation I had and appreciate just how much work and thought has been put into making him compelling, realistic, and very, very human. In fact, this is the reason why I started to analyze this scene in the first place and started writing this video. When we have scenes like this, and on top of that they give Makishima a very humanistic purpose in life, you truly can't help but love the guy despite all the horrible shit that he's done. The thing is, he defines good as striving to do better, and in his pursuit of that good, he's willing to do what others believe is morally wrong. He continuously questions the norms, and therefore in the eyes of those who conform to the social norms, he becomes the villain. Oh boy, now that was a handful. I'm really glad I got to make this video. It took a lot of time and research, so a like and a subscribe would be much appreciated. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.